The last clip cut off with me mentioning about Douglas Adams, I believe. So Douglas Adams, yeah, a name you'll recognise, the creator of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So he was the script editor of Doctor Who in this period. So this episode is really clever. Basically, the Doctor stumbles. He's away in Paris on holiday with Romana, who's played by oh God, I can't remember her name. Anyway, Romana's regenerated. She married Richard Dawkins in real life, the actress. Anyway, so he's in Paris and he stumbles across some villainy. And there's this guy. Can't totally remember what happens, but he ends up going back into other periods of time, and this guy keeps appearing through time. And what he's doing is getting the Leonardo da Vinci to paint extra copies of the Mona Lisa. The reason for that is because he's selling it because he needs to fund his experiments in time, because he needs to get back to when his spaceship was destroyed and he got splintered. So basically this character's been splintered into 7 points in time, something like that. As you say, the episode ends with a showdown basically at the birth of life on Earth itself. The Doctor goes back, I think it's 4 billion years or something. There's little squidgy things. So this guy's called, it's great, he's played by Julian Glover, who you'll know from his Christatos in For Your Eyes Only, and he's the villain in Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. So all the way through, he looks like Julian Glover. But then he pulls his mask off and he's got like a sort of seaweed kind of head and one eye, and he's called Scaroff, last of the Jaggeroff. There's a great bit. He actually kills his missus, who's played by Catherine Schell, who was Maya in Space 1999, and she's in the third Pink Panther film. And she was in the Dracula recently, actually, the Dracula at Christmas. She was cast in that, obviously for cult reasons. Anyway, he's great, he's brilliant, Scaroff, last of the Jaggeroff. It's very funny, this episode, but in the right way, and it's playful. The whole Da Vinci thing, the splitting 7 moments in time and getting copies of the Mona Lisa is brilliant. And then his ship blows up at the end. It's crap special effects, but it's just great seeing what Earth looked like 4 billion years ago. So it really is like, it's a top episode in a period where there just isn't, there's this perception Tom Baker's always great. I do quite like this season. I like The Nightmare of Eden. I like Creature in the Pit. They're okay. It just doesn't look and feel as good. And Tom Baker's last season, there's 7 stories. And, none of them are particularly bad. It's just missing something by then. They've got a new producer in. I should say that Tom Baker's era, his classic era, the producers have got Philip Hinchcliffe, and the script editor was a guy called Robert Holmes. And they were like the dream team. They were like Spielberg and Lucas of Doctor Who. They just came up with brilliant ideas, and then they get a new producer in Graham Williamson, and the first few episodes of Tom Baker keeping the sort of gothic thing, but then he starts to put his own stamp on it, but it's not as good. And then they're getting John Nathan Turner, who just goes on and on. He's like Stephen Moffat. I mean, why Doctor Who let Stephen Moffat go on for so long? I'll never know, because John Nathan Turner went on for far too long. But anyway, so that was in number 7, City of Death. And the next one in at number 6 is a fantastic episode. I mean, this was maybe going to make the top 5, but it just missed out. But it's from season 14. It's 1977. This is Leela's second episode. So the character of Leela is first basically have the Deadly Assassin episode where there's no assistant, and then the Doctor goes to a planet and you have the Face of Evil, which is a good story. It's not great. It's quite complicated. But it's one of my early memories. It introduces us to Leela, played by Louise Jameson. So you've had like 3 classic assistants on the trot. You've had Katie Manning, Joe Grant, classic assistant. Sarah Jane Smith, Liz Sladen, greatest ever. And then Leela, who was loved by all dads back in the day, because she wears kind of like cave girl type gear like Raquel Welch. After that, you got Mary Tam, I'm a fan of. Some people don't like her, but yeah, I love Mary Tam. But anyway, Robots of Death, great plot. Basically lands on some planet. They're mining some kind of desert sand, and all the people live on this massive kind of ship digger thing that basically digs the sand on mines. Yeah, and what it is, it's a play on 10 Little Indians, the Agatha Christie story, where you've got people that can find space and they're getting picked off one by one. And it's also called And Then There Were None. That's the more common name for it. There is another title for it, but we'll not use that one. That's going back to the dark days. Anyway, sorry, I'm losing my thread. Corned, you can do it. Where was I? It was it's Robots of Death. There's 10 of them on the thing. Yeah, it's like Agatha Christie. Anyway, they're in a confined space and they're going to get picked off one by one. But on this vessel, digging vessel they're on, they've got robot servants. Yeah, and they kind of got numbers like VOC 1, VOC 2, VOC, Super VOC. Yeah, so there's the Super VOC, which is kind of the head robot, and then you've got the other robots, and they're really good. They're kind of really cool. The outfits, they look a bit like Tweaky from Buck Rogers in the 25th century, but just not crap. And the actors playing them just use really cool voices. Basically, yeah, it's like the plot is are the robots killing the people? What it is, there's actually a rogue criminal on the ship who's pretending to be someone else. He's some mad scientist, and he's programmed the robots, one of the robots, to kill people. It's also got an actress called Pamela Salem in, and she turns up in quite a few things in the 1970s, and she's pretty hot like as well, which is, it's always good when you've got that in 70s TV. So yeah, it's a really good episode. I'm just looking, who is it written by? Chris Boucher. Yeah, so Chris Boucher wrote a lot of good. So he wrote the classic Blake Seven episode, what's it called? Rumours of Death. Yeah, so that's for many Blake Seven fans. The great Avon episode, Rumours of Death, is the all-time Blake Seven episode. And Chris Boucher, I think, wrote that. So Robots of Death, yeah, 13 million viewing peak, 12.5 average. Basically, in total peak Doctor Who. This is where like the cultural phenomenon that is Doctor Who, is really takes hold, and why Tom Baker's such a big part of our childhoods and stuff. Okay, sorry my lapse there. I'm 49 on Saturday, so just bear with me. Now, how am I doing for time? Okay, we can squeeze in a bit more. I check across there, I've got the time on there. Okay, so we're coming up to the top 5. Yeah, I think we'll maybe get a couple more in, and then the final 3. Or do we stop now and do another thing? We'll carry on. We're carrying on. Okay, so this episode is my all-time favourite John Pertwee episode. It's a 7-parter, and it's called Inferno. So basically, John Pertwee starts off 1970, the end of his first season. He does this episode. Now, what's interesting about that season is it's only 4 stories. First story is Spearhead from Space, which people will know the imagery from. Basically, shop dummies come to life and come out of the shops. It's not a great episode. It's kind of classic because of that image, but John Pertwee's not really found his zone. At this time, he's got a different assistant, not his classic assistant. She's called Liz Shaw. I quite like her. She's a scientist, so it's really taking a cue from the times. She's very professional. She knows what she's doing. It's taken on board women's roles, women's rights in the early 70s. The Joe Grant character was supposed to be a scientist, but I love the character, but she was patronised by the Doctor, and like the writing was pretty poor, really, if we're honest. But she's just like very much loved. So anyway, he's teamed up with Liz Shaw. Your next 3 episodes, stories, are all 7 episodes long. Now, it makes them quite long. So the second one's the Silurians, which has been shown on TV recently. It's a good story. The Silurians are the cave-dwelling relatives of the sea-dwelling sea devils. So they interlink there, and I think they brought the Silurians back in the Tennant era. Or was it the Smith era? The Smith era, I think. That was a good episode, actually. That was the Smith one that was maybe missing. But could be wrong. No, the Satan Pit, that's the other one with David Tennant where they're digging in space. Anyway, I've waffled about Smith and Tennant, we jumped ahead. But yeah, so you got the Silurians, and then they do an episode called Ambassadors of Death. Now, I only saw that once via my mate, some knocked off BBC collection. I'll tell you about that in a sec, back in the day. So I watched that again a few years ago. And then Ambassadors of Death, it's an interesting story. It's just a bit slow. It's 7 episodes is too much, really. Sometimes 6 works if the writing's really good. However, the 7-episode Inferno's an all-time classic. Basically, viewing figures pretty low. 5.5 million average, 6 million peak. Written by a guy called Don Horton. The plot's great. Basically, there's a kind of volcano. That's it. the Doctor is messing around with the TARDIS, and he ends up going into a parallel universe. And in the parallel universe, he's basically with UNIT, but UNIT are basically fascists. So the Brigadier's got an eye patch. Everyone's evil. Liz Shaw's kind of, she's like Eva Braun or whatever. So basically, what he's doing there, there's work. He's investigating stuff at a nuclear power plant. That's it. He ends up the TARDIS messing around with the TARDIS. I think because it's a long while since I've seen this. He goes in this parallel universe. They're still messing about with the power plant, but they're drilling down. That's it. They're drilling into the Earth too far, and they're going to basically crack the Earth's core and cause basically Armageddon. And of course, the main scientist gets infected and grows like fur on his face and turns green. Who's working on it? But what's interesting about the episode, it shows. Well, why would the Brigadier? The Brigadier wouldn't be a fascist. He wouldn't be like that. But it shows that point in time where things could change. Life can go a different way, and it's kind of exploring that. It's like every time in your life you go, if I took that turning, or if I did make that decision, your life would end up different. And it's just working on that thing that obviously in this parallel universe, there's been a point in politics where it's gone a different way. Fascism's taken hold, but that's the new normal. They don't see what they're doing is wrong. So it kind of mixes a bit with the times we're in as well. So it's a really good episode. Obviously, I've not seen this for a long time. Basically, all the Doctor Who's I kind of rewatched. I rented them from my local library on DVD. All the Pertwee right through to the end of the Colin Baker era. Sorry, Sylvester McCoy. And it took me about 10 years to get through them. So I would have got this fairly early on, but it's always been one of my faves. I first saw it, like I said, I had a friend, we still mate online for some ages, at college, and massive Doctor Who fan, and he had a mate who worked at the BBC. So what this guy used to do was record tape Doctor Who episodes from the big U-matic tape machines. And he had loads of copies from lost episodes from all over the world, and he had them all logged anyway on video, and we used to watch them. But obviously a lot of Doctor Who episodes disappeared. Basically they got put in trash in landfill back in the 1970s, early 70s, because I thought, we don't need these. It's that typical mentality we see in life in the wider world. We ditch things because we think we're not going to need them. We don't need that. It's like, we don't need canals. All right, well, we do because, we'll build pubs on them and people will still use them, So they destroyed it. All these things are lost. Sometimes things turn up, but very rarely. Okay, so that's Inferno, a great classic John, the great John Pertwee episode. And I think regularly, John Pertwee's era is not as popular as the Trout and Baker with fans, but Inferno's regularly in high positions in all-time Doctor Who episodes. Check it out. Okay, the next one. We've probably got enough time to get through this, and I'll have to do the top three on another day. But basically, imagine this, right? I play music, I write songs, right? Imagine you've been working on music for 10 years. You write your best song. But immediately before that, you announce you're stopping. So you write your best song, and goes like, blooming hell, mate, that's brilliant, that song. You should carry on, but you decided to quit. This is exactly what happens with this next episode. And it's the only Peter Davison episode in here. And it's the classic, the truly great Caves of Androzani. I think it's testament to how great this episode is that it's seen off classic Baker and Pertwee episodes. It's an anomaly. Basically, your Peter Davison era, it starts off and he kind of freshens things up. His first season's pretty good. Got Earthshock, Kinder, which are minor classics. Visitation, really good episode. He goes back to Old England, ends up, there's a fire at the end, and the assistant, I think it's Tegan, goes, Doctor, shouldn't we put out the fire? He goes, no, don't worry about that. And then you see the address, Pudding Lane, and that's what I love about Doctor Who. Now you have the virtue signalling, telling the audience everything. Back then everyone knows like Pudding Lane, it's where the Great Fire of London started, so the Doctor ends up in real history and he can't interfere with it. So anyway, Davidson's time flight's not that great. Fort of Doomsday, that was actually the first episode where they showed out a sequence. And Castrovalva, I don't like, that's like Logopolis. I'm just not interested into all the math stuff, but it's pretty good. There's the two-parter as well, and the name's escaping me, but it's a good two-parter. Davidson's second season is it's kind of a bit meta, like Enlightenment, where they're on a ship and the Black Guardian comes back. Arc of Infinity is all right. It's okay. There's nothing particularly wrong. There's just nothing great. His third season's up and down. Then his second to last episode, he does a story called Planet of Fire, and he gets his new assistant, Perry. In actual fact, the whole Davison era, one of the mistakes they made, they had too many assistants. At one point, they had 3. And they had this guy called Turlo, wasn't that great. But what they got wrong there was an assistant called Tegan. And Tegan, played by Janet Fielding, was a great actress. Well, not a great actress, but she was a really good character. And what they should have just had was Tegan with Peter Davidson. And just chosen the classic Baker-Pertwee dynamic. Anyway, so the last episode, Case of Androzani, basically the writer, Robert Holmes, comes back. So Robert Holmes is a classic script editor of the Baker era. And they're getting a new director, a guy called Graham Harper, and he just brings like cinematic touches to it. There's some lovely like tracking shots. There's like lovely lap dissolves, really atmospheric. So basically, he lands on the planet Androzani Minor. In the catacombs, in the caves, there's the mad scientist Sharaz Jek. Basically, he wears a mask. He's been horribly burned. It's like Phantom of the Opera. Basically, taking a classic gothic horror influence. Above, there's a political shenanigans with a guy called Trau Morgus. The guy who plays this is brilliant. He actually breaks the fourth wall at one point almost and turns to camera. He's like having a conversation with himself, a bit like I am now. But he's fantastic character. And basically what happens is they mine this stuff called Spectrox, but you can get ill off it, and Perry gets Spectrox toxemia. And so the Doctor is in a race against time to save her. And the climax of the third episode is the greatest cliffhanger in the entire history of Doctor Who. Basically, he commandeers a ship. He's flying to the planet to crash land, and his sort of final line is something like, "I'm not going to let Perry down, and you haven't stopped me yet, and you won't stop me now." Something like that. And it's just so fantastic. It's brilliant. And there's another cliffhanger in the first episode. I think it's the first one where they get shot by a firing squad, and you just think, how the hell they got out of that? It's so good. Sharaz Jek's a great villain. He's really good. Nicola Bryant really established herself as Perry, and it's good chemistry. And Davison, he was very good as a Doctor, and he gives a great performance. It's almost like, if he could have carried on. But the difference is the writing's there. They've got Robert Holmes in. They've got a good director in. Everything goes up a notch. Just look at my notes. Yeah, and the actual fact, the vaccine that he has to get the I forget what it is. It's some kind of liquid from the bats that inhabit the cave. It's just quite interesting. It's got bats and viruses in it. Obviously, with what's happening now, but it's just a classic four-parter, and it really is classic. It's just fast moving. It's got great characters, and pretty amazing that it did that. It's just this is season 21. I don't know what the viewing figures were on this at that time. Doctor Who. The Davidson era had done okay, but it was always struggling really to get the viewing figures of the classic Baker era. So I'll see you for the last 3 parts soon. Cheers.